Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thank you for joining me for another week of the podcast, and if you listened to episode 225, then you have some perspective or reference for some of what I'm going to discuss in this episode 226. This episode is being released on February 26, 2024, and this is a very important date for the Black man and Black woman in the wilderness of North America, and I'll share that with you a little bit later in the episode. But as we close out what is celebrated as Black History Month, I decided to record an episode discussing Black History Month and what it could mean and should mean for our people. And if I can give some context of history just to start us off in this episode, Black history was the brainchild of, or an expansion of the brainchild of Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson was a historian. He was an author. He was a journalist, and he realized in the early 1900s that it would be pertinent that a Negro History Week was formed so that Black people could know and learn about their history. It was an exploration of the past of our people. And I'll also share with you something I learned recently that I did not know, that in 1895, there was a celebration of something called Douglas Day, in which Mary Church Terrell, who was an activist and an educator, she decided or determined that Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist, should be celebrated. And that was something that she petitioned to the schools in the Washington area, the colored schools, that is. And so January 12th, 1897, the school board sided with her, and the date of February 14th, 1897, the students were permitted to observe Douglas Day in their school, and that permitted them to study the life and work of Frederick Douglass. And because he was born a slave, and like so many of our people born a slave or born sometime shortly after slavery, we did not know our birthdays. We were not in official registrars like we are today. You can go down to Vital Statistics and get a copy of your birth certificate. And so since he did not know the actual date of his birth, February 14th was the date that he celebrated his birthday. And so that was the date that was observed as Douglas Day. And so in building on that, Carter G. Woodson comes along and determined that it would be appropriate for our people to learn about our past, to learn about our achievements as Negroes, as we were called at that time. And his movement gave birth to the formation of the Association for the Study of Negro Life. And this was formed on September 9th, 1915. And it was specifically aimed at the scientific study of Black life and history. Shortly thereafter, the Journal of Negro History was produced and published, and it allowed our people a means outside of the school classrooms to engage in the study of our people's history. And in 1926, February 1926, he announced, Carter G. Woodson did, the first Negro History Week. And it was launched in February, as history informs us, in part because Douglas Day was being celebrated that month, but also February is the month that the President Abraham Lincoln's birth anniversary or birthday was observed. And there was a time where our people celebrated the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. And so Abraham Lincoln, he is and was held in such high esteem as being the president who, quote, freed the slaves, wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, and ultimately lost his life because of that endeavor. And so in the 60s and beyond, the celebration or the observance of Negro History Week continued, and it expanded through Black colleges and universities throughout the country. Societies were formed, curricula was developed for the classroom. And then in 1976, President Gerald Ford publicized the formation and observation of Black History Month as a time for Americans to study the often overlooked accomplishments of Black Americans. So that is a very abbreviated history of Black History Month. Its origins with Carter G. Woodson, with Negro History Week. And when I'm on this podcast, I emphasize so often substance over symbolism. When we were observing the MLK Day, the birth date and the celebration, recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King, I shared with you that some critics have said that we cannot celebrate or observe the life and legacy of Dr. King as if he is a mascot for American history or a mascot for the civil rights movement. And so I suggest that in this episode, as we are closing out Black History Month, that we grab onto the substance and we put down the symbolic gestures that may often not have any meaningful change that comes behind the symbolism. Symbols are great, and symbols may be necessary, but they are to point us to a destination. They are to represent something, but we want the something that the symbols represent, not just the symbol itself. And that's why we have to be focused on the substance. And so going back to last week's episode, and it was titled, I Disagree with Mark Lamont Hill. If you listen to that episode, you heard me say that I did not believe that Black people should call themselves African American because African and American are European names, and we should not identify as Amerigo Vespucci or Leos Africanus, for which these nations or continents were named after. That our history goes well beyond the European conquering, dominating, and renaming the various parts and territories of our planet. And so, in consideration of Negro History Week, the fact that we were identified and began identifying ourselves as Negroes. Consider those brothers and sisters who were those first who stepped their feet onto the soil of North America after being taken into a brutal and cruel and horrifying captivity, knowing who they were, knowing who they belonged to, having cultures, having language, having names, and those crucial things that identify one as a people, identify one to their kin, identify one to territory, and having that identity stripped away. And then that individual has children, And as we know in the history of our people, that the tongue was severed out of the adults, and they were unable to teach their children language, teach their children their original names, teach their children the ways of their people. And those children were brought up exclusively and solely as slaves, having never tasted nor touched freedom, independence, self-determination, that their entire world, their entire existence was that to serve their slave master. And so they became whatever it is their master told them that they were. They were no longer connected to a tribe. They were no longer connected to the land for which their fathers lived. They were only and solely that which their masters made them to be, in service of their master's needs, in service to the needs and desires of those who were in leadership of this nation. And so what did the slaves call themselves? The slaves called themselves Negroes because that's what the master called them. And so Carter G. Woodson, with all his great intentions and his spirit to help our people connect to who we are, what we've accomplished, so that we could be connected back to the love of self that was removed from us, the dignity of self that was taken from us, so that we can be proud of our people, our history, and our accomplishments. Negro History Week was formed, but we were not Negroes. We did not know it. He did not know it, perhaps. We never called ourselves Negroes until our slave master gave us that name. But that was not our name as a Negro. And so, as I say, we should, I believe, reject both African and American because we are Black people. We cannot accept being called Negroes. And so often you may hear some people say so-called American Negroes because we were called that, but we are not that. And in an exploration of the history of our people, I can recall being in grade school and the Black History Month coming around, which I should say evolved from Negro History Week to Black History Week to African American History Week, because I guess we decided Black wasn't too refined a term to call ourselves. We then began identifying as Afro-American or African American. And so the observation of the Black History Month when I was in school, I recall Jesse Owens, right? I recall Dr. King, of course. I recall Rosa Parks. I recall the great inventors, the great scientists, those of our people who made contributions to this nation. Yet the contributions of our brothers and sisters in this nation were the contributions of slaves, because we could not take ownership in the legacy of our technology, the advancements. We did not reap those benefits. Our slave master reaped the benefits of that. You know, I think about learning about Ben Franklin and the discovery of electricity, the discovery of the radio, and all of these technologies. We now learn about the stoplight and things that come closer to the modern history and the advancements or the inventions that Black people have made, but they're largely in use towards the service of our former slave master. And we, the children, the family of those Black men and women with those great minds, have not reaped the benefits. The film about the astronauts and the sisters who were responsible for those astronauts getting into space, We're just now learning that. That is, I mean, that is something that enabled our former slave master to get out there, to explore beyond this atmosphere, right? And so we we can celebrate those sisters, but we are not reaping the financial benefits of what those women did. And so this is what I mean when I say that the advancements or the inventions that our people made, we made this as slaves. And so we don't get to reap what we sow as slaves. Our master gets the benefit, or our former master gets the benefit of reaping the crops of our brilliance. And so we have to explore a history beyond the time when we were the property of another people. And so, in studying the history of man, I recall learning about Darwin in school. I recall learning about the great archaeologist, anthropologist, Louis Leakey, and his wife, and now his granddaughter Louise Leakey, and them teaching us in history class, in social studies class, in science class about the evolution of man, and being taught that man evolved from apes. The hominid, and then we had the Homo sapien. But this too is not the history of the black man. We did not evolve from apes. Our origins, our history is not that of the caveman. And so when we don't know a knowledge of ourselves, when we don't know the true knowledge of our history, when our history is only given to us encapsulated by that which our former slave master desires for us to know, then the history will be incomplete. And so as we are concluding Black History Month, formerly Negro History Week, we have to examine whether the history that our people have been taught, are being taught, is sufficient enough with all of the good intentions. Is it sufficient, complete, or comprehensive enough to enable our people to learn the true knowledge of themselves? And I would suggest that the history that we have been taught, that we are being taught, the history that we are accessing because it's readily available, is not sufficient for us to reverse the condition, to solve the problems that we have amongst each other. It is not sufficient because, as I said, the advancements that our people made, we made them for our slave master who is reaping the benefits. The history that we're getting, the history is also benefiting the slave master. And as we see, we've been observing Negro History Week or Negro History Month since the 20s. Look at the condition of our people. And so we have to do an examination. We have to be honest with ourselves. Us driving nicer cars, us wearing finer clothes. How has the advancements, and I say so-called advancements, that our people have made, how has that benefited us? The opportunity to vote, the opportunity to enjoy desegregated restaurants and lunch counters and hotels, has all of this really been beneficial? We thought that it was our right to enter into spaces where we were not wanted, and we acted as if that was somehow the promised land. And now we still see our people in a horrific condition. The challenge for us, though, I think largely is thinking that because we have folks in C-suite offices, because we have folks that are receiving, incomes that far exceed, many of our foreparents even thought of. The lifestyle that some of our people live, especially those entertainers, we can look at that, and because social media and television and radio, that can certainly give us an image that produces a thought in us that we've made it. But have we made it? When we do a real close, sincere examination of our people, what have we made it to? Some may suggest that mentally and morally, we are a weaker people now than we ever have been. And so we should be cautious about being induced or seduced by the trappings of the world, by that which we can purchase, by that which we can finance. We should be cautious about that, because in all of the time that we've spent observing Negro History Week and Black History Month, we do not see the changes in our people's condition that we are entitled to. Having sovereignty, having the ability to govern ourselves, having the ability to cultivate our young men, our boys into strong men, our girls into dignified women. It seems that with all of the advancement that we're doing, with all of the access that we have now in this desegregated, open society, that we are taking these trappings and harming ourselves even more. Except now the harm is coming by our own hands. We don't fear the master's whip. We don't fear the master's gun. We don't fear the master's rope that he used to lynch us as much as we should fear what we are doing to ourselves. So the question again is, the history that we're being taught, the history that is accessible to us, has it been complete, sufficient, or comprehensive enough to enable our people to learn a true knowledge of ourselves? So, in the closing of Black History Month, I would suggest that what we have been accessible to, or what has been accessible to us, what we have been learning, what we have been taught, it has been insufficient. We have not had a strong foundation. In fact, we've had a weak foundation. And for us to solve the problems and improve the conditions of our people, and when I say improve the condition of our people, I am not talking about just living in a big, pretty house. I am not talking about having money in the bank. I am not just talking about wearing fine clothes, but I'm talking about being able to educate our children into a love and knowledge of themselves, and reconnecting our mothers and our fathers back to their children, disconnecting from social media, disconnecting from video gaming and all of the things that distract us from building a reality for ourselves and settling for the reality that we built for the slave master. When are we going to design a reality for ourselves, raising our children to be strong, to be dignified, and not to be these unfortunate caricatures that we get in the music industry? So success for us cannot be defined by what our former slave master defined as success for him. We have to figure out and decide what success is for us. And so in closing this Black History Month, and it's Black History Month as a celebration is something that I'm really hesitant to. I mean, the idea that our people are being celebrated, that's always a beautiful thing that we have this, but it also makes me pause, because I'll see our people, Black people in America, descendants of American slavery, often donning the attire or the traditional prints of the African tribes that we don't have any knowledge of, connection to. The prints that we wear, we know whether that print should be a blouse, should be a skirt? Is that print only worn by married women? Is that print worn by single women? Is that a print that's only worn by mothers? Is that a print that's only worn on Sundays? Is that a print that's worn for worship? Should this print be worn on the head? We want to be connected to ourselves and to the history of our people. And it can be difficult for us to see the greatness here in this nation. So we want to hold on to or grab a hold to that which we think represents a strong Black reality. So we reach back to the continent of Africa, that which we have been disconnected from. But I say to you, brothers and sisters, if we are going to know the reality of ourselves, then we have to go so far back in time. And in fact, the reality of our people is the reality of God. And that, this is Nora Speaks. It is not a religious podcast. However, I have to tell the truth. And it is the truth that there were no people in the light of the sun before the Black man and the Black woman. Now that is Black history. And that history was not just on the continent of Africa, named after Leos Africanus. Our history goes beyond the European. And this is something that we must know. So as this episode is being released February 26th, I encourage listeners. Now, those who listen, you probably know that I am a Muslim and I am a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I am a member of the Nation of Islam. And when I learned about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and what he taught us, it was then that I really began to understand the history of our people. And so I know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not someone who is discussed during this month, although we will learn about Muhammad Ali, his student. And Muhammad Ali was more than a boxer. He was somebody that gave Black people pride, not just because he boxed in the ring. We had so many Black boxers who were amazing athletes, but the stance that Muhammad Ali took when he changed his name, when his name was changed from Cassius Clay to that beautiful righteous name of Muhammad Ali, that gave him recognition not just here in this nation, but connected him to the world, that made him a great man. So we love Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali had a teacher. We love Malcolm X. We celebrate Malcolm X. And it's interesting how America now accepts Malcolm X, but America hated Malcolm X when he was a student and follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, teaching Black people a knowledge of themselves, a knowledge that Carter G. Woodson, with all of his great intentions, did not yet have the fullness of the experience and time of our people. And when Malcolm X taught that as a student and follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, America hated him. But now we can't avoid him. Every year there's another film, there's another documentary, there's another television show about Malcolm X, who has been remastered and remixed and given to us as if he was a humanitarian. Malcolm X was concerned about the plight of Black people in America. And when he turned and began teaching something else, his success was limited. But we love Malcolm X. Malcolm X had a teacher. Malcolm X's teacher was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is somebody that our people celebrate. And he deserves to be celebrated because he too worked tirelessly on behalf of Black people. Jesse Jackson studied the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I can go on and on about Muslims and non-Muslims who became great after sitting and learning from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I'm not suggesting that I'm asking you to become Muslim. That's not what this conversation is about. What I'm asking you to do is to explore a history that our former slave master is not teaching us. That is not the history, is not the exploration that will uphold the status quo of our people. If you learn about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and what he's taught our people, then your ears will be tuned to hear his words coming from all of these so-called Negro leaders who are in political office, who are in business and business leaders. You will hear the economics and the economists coming straight from the classroom of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Those individuals who want to build and create schools so that our children can learn unto themselves. That was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so there's so much that we have to learn. And if we are really interested in changing the condition, improving the condition, if we are really sincere about that, then we cannot continue to exclude the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in our study of Black history, because it is the study of this man and the study specifically of what he taught us that will show us so much beyond the cotton fields of the South in this nation and beyond the pyramids in Egypt. There's so much that we should know, that we could know. And it is this knowledge that has been kept from us. But when we have access to it, we can and will do great things. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.